Welcome to the Holistic Accountant Podcast. This is where we cut through conventional accounting and show you how a genuinely holistic approach drives better after-tax outcomes. It's not about ticking boxes or churning out tax returns. It's about strategic advice that builds lasting wealth. If you find this episode valuable, leave a rating and share it with someone who will benefit. Okay, today, Mena, I would like to talk about how the finance function in a business can evolve over time, really from startup stage through to growth stage, through to scaling to a much larger business. And it's something, people sort of enjoy, I guess, that experience of a business that's growing very fast or grows over time, slowly, either way. It's something that business owners need to sort of navigate. They need to sort of understand when they need a bookkeeper, when to transition to, a financial controller, when they need a CFO, and also to what extent does an external tax agent and business accounting advisors, holistic accountants, if you like, fit into that picture, and when they can lean on those external advisors and when they need to sort of insource that within their business. So it's going to be different for every business, of course, but what we wanted to do today is just touch on some of our experiences with our clients and, help people kind of navigate that business transition. So, Mena, why don't we start with bookkeeping? Most businesses are going to need a bookkeeper almost irrespective of size, not tiny businesses, micro businesses, of course, but generally, for payroll and general bookkeeping. But how does it scale, Mena?
Yeah, that's right. Bookkeeping answers just really one question, and that's really around what happened. So that basically just addresses, payroll, daily reconciliations, and so forth. But as your business really grows, it's no longer enough. Bookkeepers or bookkeeping doesn't help you strategize sort of decision making. And a lot can break down with bookkeeping when transactions aren't reviewed or reconciliations are delayed or skipped, or there's no close sort of guidance or processes or systems around the bookkeeping process. So at a particular point in time in a business life cycle, bookkeeping is just not enough for your finance function. You need there to be more oversight. You need there to be more strategy and more insight into how your decisions are made on a daily basis. So there needs to be somewhat of a separation between your bookkeeper and the person that's reviewing your bookkeeping. So someone that can review the data entry, ensure that there's everything that is being processed accurately. There's a clear sort of cadence with the bookkeeping, the payroll, the tax obligations, and there's a handoff between basically the bookkeeper and that person that's actually in charge. Because without this accuracy, you can't actually make any of those insightful decisions. So you need to then introduce that middle layer of finance management.
And that's where a financial controller fits in. So a financial controller is really someone that sits between bookkeeper and CFO, if you like. They don't do a lot of the processing. That's really the bookkeeper's job, is to go into Xero or Mile, whatever you might be using, allocate all the transactions, prepare things like BAS and payroll and all those sorts of things. What the financial controller does is really sort of own the data set, if you like. So they're involved in the monthly close, whatever transactions or journals might need to be implemented at that particular time, just making sure everything's accurate, all the numbers make sense, that the reports that are coming out of the accounting software are in fact reliable. So it's really about accuracy and consistency across the whole data set, if you like. And then the next step is to really produce decision-ready information. So it's great to pull out a P&L, but we will make sure that what was spoken about previously in previous podcasts, like ratios are included, that expenses are allocated, whether they're direct costs or indirect costs. If you've got activity cost-based pricing and so forth and accounting, it's really about pulling all the information out of your accounting system and putting it together in a format that makes a lot of sense, that gives you insight into the business's health, its profitability and its cash flow position, so that the people that run the business, the CEO or the marketing department, the operations department, have those insights to reflect in their decision making also. So the signs that you need to have a financial controller in your business really is driven by complexity and size. The bigger the business in terms of turnover or number of transactions, typically, the more complexity there is involved. Also, if you've got a lot of different products, a lot of different cost centers, a lot of different areas where cost is coming from in terms of inputs and consultants and staff and these sorts of things, adds to the complexity. Also a growing team or external stakeholders. So if you do take on, any investors to the business, they will typically want to see more reliable information. And you can scale to a financial controller as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, you've got a bookkeeper today and tomorrow all of a sudden you're going to wake up and you need a financial controller. The way that you can use an external accountant is like a virtual financial controller, if you like. Now, you might not do month-end accounts, but you might do quarter-end accounts. And so the bookkeeper will do everything, and then your external accountant will go through a very similar process of what they would do at the end of the financial year in terms of reconcile accounts, make sure they're reliable, make sure everything's allocated correctly, and then produce a set of reports that help you interpret how your business is going. And your external accountant, holistic accountant, can be involved in that process because they're going to have insights and experiences to share also. And when that will be kind of a bit of a stepping stone to potentially then be in the future in the position where you do need a full-time person in that role that's internal to the business.
The bridge between a financial controller and a CFO is a finance committee. And you'll have that in place when you're not ready for a CFO or for a CFO to be involved in sort of, high level strategic decision making and so forth. And also you might not be ready to pay a CFO salary. So you would employ what we call a finance committee. And that finance committee really sort of bridges the gap and completes your finance function. They help the oversight of your finance function, ensures that everything is working in order, everything is accurate, all your systems, your processes are all accounted for, so that if you step away from the business, that you're able to still have full control, or at least that there's full control of your finance function. Now, when you need a CFO isn't there to be involved in the books. A CFO is really there to help you make strategic decisions. And this is particularly important if you're a business owner that's not really, again, I'll be conscious of how I say this, but not really business savvy as such. They focus on things such as capital allocation or scenario planning to help you sort of make decisions around investments within your business and any sort of risk trade-offs. So they work on the business and not necessarily in your ledger. So you'd consider a CFO if you're, for example, taking on investors and need to put a board in place where a CFO would report to that board, or that you might have really sort of grand sort of growth plans. You might be sort of venturing out into different sort of businesses, or really sort of gung-ho with your current business, and you sort of need to sort of pressure test your current financial systems and even your operations. Or there's a lot of complexity in your business, so you might be a lot of entities, a lot of moving parts. You need to get sort of assurance around how all your operations are currently working and how it's sort of sensitive to certain sort of metrics. So that's really where you'd really need a CFO.
So just to wrap up then, a really healthy finance function is one that gives you a lot of comfort and confidence that the numbers that you're being presented with are correct. Now, that's really important for a couple of different reasons, or many reasons really. But obviously, if you're going to base decisions on those numbers, you want to make sure that they're accurate and up to date and all those sorts of things. But also things like fraud. You want to make sure that you're on top of your numbers so that no one's stealing money from you. And you want to have a really robust finance system in place to make sure that's the case. So it's incredibly important, but that finance function needs to scale and change as your business matures. So it starts off with bookkeeping typically, and an external business advisor, tax agent and accountant. And that external accountant can really carry you through this whole business transition. The next stop is then really a financial controller, and that could be virtual, in terms of using your external accountant to do that, or eventually having someone sitting in a chair that's, part of your team. Then a finance committee can kind of bridge the gap between financial control and CFO, and then eventually a CFO, particularly if you have such a large business or you've got a board in place and so forth. And that transition can certainly be managed by your holistic accountant. There probably is not a time when a business doesn't need an external accountant. Having someone external to your business reviewing the books and tax returns and so forth is fundamental to separation of control. And that separation of control is a really important step to make sure you've got accurate and reliable information as well. So the aim of today's episode was really to give you you a bit of an overview of how that finance function changes over time and changes as a business grows as well. And it might help you kind of understand what pieces of the puzzle you might be missing in your business, or if you've got significant growth plans, at what stage, how your finance function needs to change to accommodate that. But it's something certainly your holistic accountant can work with you on. And even recruiting for some of these roles, your holistic accountant will have and should have an intimate knowledge of your business and what's necessary, plus also industry knowledge on, what questions to ask an accountant or a financial controller or a CFO to really understand their capabilities. So involve them in that process as well. They can be part of that process to make sure you've got the right people sitting in the right seats. Okay, until next time, bye for now.